Topic 1. U.S. State Department has approved a $5 million gun sale to Mexican military forces accused of murder and kidnapping. This is far from the first time the U.S. has been accused of aiding foreign human rights violators. But should the U.S. government be concerned with where its weapons end up? Mexico is an ally, so should we leave their internal affairs up to them and support them as needed? It doesn't matter if those same weapons are used against people on behalf of the American government, like, for instance, against migrants. So yeah, gun sale to was it the Mexican Navy and then one other branch, but they've been accused. Like there was like a group of them that have been accused of like just like murder and kidnapping. It's really bad actually. It's actually quite a terrible situation. But I want to think is and because so many people made the point to me previously that these things don't necessarily matter, shouldn't be our concern. So I just kind of want to explore all that. All right, we'll start with opening statements with Fanatic.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It just seems like just a little bit of a scary idea. I think every time you start talking about arms deals from the United States government and a Latin American country, it's hard for me not to think of the Iran-Contra affairs and how that led to so many harms, and with the cocaine and crack distribution within the black community seemed really problematic. So I don't know, but ultimately this just seems like, I don't know. Yes, Mexico is our ally, but I don't feel like we've ever really relied on them for very much, especially not militarily. And it seems like there's so many problems with their government and the cartels and all of that. I don't know what the freak we're thinking. I don't know, leave it to the United States to do some nonsense. Go Biden.
Yeah.
Yeah, I generally agree with Fanatic. I think that since there's a lot of chaos going on in Mexico right now, and we can't know where our guns are going to end up, it's probably not a great idea to just be selling this large of a shipment to them. I do think that it's a little bit better of a case than we had with the Iran-Contra stuff, because at least here, there is a legitimate problem that the government of Mexico is facing, mainly the crime and cartels. So it does, the weapons, like at least the motivations are good for this, and that we want to help Mexico with their crime problem. But still, I think that our history probably makes it not a good idea, but I'd be open to changing my mind.
Counterpoints?
Yeah, I'm 100% good with it. The Department of the Navy, the Marine Corps typically falls under the Department of the Navy. The Mexican government uses the Marines as a non-corrupt kind of like SWAT team to go after the narcos because the police are often infiltrated. As a result, these guns aren't guaranteed to go to the right people. But let's just face it, Mexico is not hurting for guns right now, primarily through straw purchases through the southern border, where private citizens have taken it upon themselves in order to buy really, 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 really nice guns and sell it to the cartels at a profit. Basically, the Mexican cartel, I don't know if y'all remember this, but I think there was a relative of Chapo or something like that who got taken in by the police, and then the cartel shut down a city with machine guns and 50 caliber rifles, and basically were able to bluff the military and law enforcement in order to giving up their prize. If you want to have that if you want the military and law enforcement to actually do something, you have to equip them properly in order to do their jobs properly. So I'm good with it. I do think it needs to be coupled with financial aid. That way you're dealing with, the socioeconomic conditions as well. But I'll leave that for the open.
Thank you, Mad Latin.
All right, so I guess I have a few things here. The first is that I completely disagree that we don't rely on Mexico for anything. We literally have them on the southern border. We use Mexico as our buffer against the entirety of Central and South America, right? So all the migrants are going through Mexico, and we've got negotiations with Mexico to prevent those migrants from actually approaching our borders on some level. And it's not 100% successful, but we're definitely using Mexico for that purpose. Mexico is, I think, the 15th largest economy in the world, so it's a trading partner as well. So there's a lot of reasons why we want Mexico to be a happy, stable country, and we've certainly exploited the country for the last, I don't know, 100 years or so. Going back to the Mexican Revolution, in 1913, they had a democracy that was elected, right? and we literally sabotaged their democratically elected government to install a military junta so we could exploit and profit from it. And then we subsequently occupied Veracruz and did all these other things to the nation in the interest of our own security. So this policy is a further extension of that. We're giving the Mexican Navy and Marines arms to deal with their drug problem. The Marines were accused. There are 30 different Marines from across the whole organization that had been used by their cartels. I think they were double agents or something to execute some kidnappings, that sort of thing. But they were arrested in April and are being brought to justice. There's not really much news coming from that specific case. So I don't know what that. We really don't know how widespread the corruption through the Mexican Marines or the Navy is, but it definitely should give us a lot of concerns. I would hope that our administration has more information than we do on that specifically. Yeah, definitely on the practical scale, lots of misgivings. On the ethical scale, also lots of misgivings. There's problems with delivering the guns, but there's problems with not delivering the guns. We have to choose between the cartels or causing more violence in Mexico, basically.
RV.
So this is actually this boils down to a lot of different issues, but one of the biggest things that I can't help but notice is security at the border having a big, to do with this. But that's I guess aside. In 2014, Mexican cartels fired into Texas towns from across the border. This recent occurrence wasn't the only occurrence of that having occurred. It never occurred under Donald Trump. It did occur under the tail end of Obama's presidency and under the now beginning stages of Biden's presidency. So that's of note. The another thing that's interesting is that that border the border security issue, I believe, is so fundamentally tied to this. And that actually I would agree with counterpoints even in when he said black market dealings with domestic citizens that'll then sell off high-end weaponry for a high premium to, say, counterparts across the border. This is only strengthening the case that someone like myself might make, that we need to tighten that up, because things like for example, and the name escapes me, so give me 1 second, the Los Ibanos ferry. You can look this up. I have a picture available. There are videos of people taking it. An unregulated ferry at a small juncture of the Rio Grande. It is privately owned, and the owners are, quote, classified. The U.S. government doesn't really know who the owners are, neither does Mexico's government. Things like this exist along this area. And this is only sending weaponry to a place where it is as corrupt as even town rebel forces that form to defend against corruption wind up being corrupt towards their own populations. It's almost like a downward spiral of, well, whoever gets the most automatics is top dog. And this has been going on for a long time. And I actually agree with the people here saying, well, yeah, the U.S. arms the wrong people. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely why, given everything I've said, if I've painted sort of a decent picture for you, this is exactly why we need to avoid sending things like high-end weaponry for money or for any other reason to somewhere like Mexico. Those Marines are just a tip of the iceberg as it relates to the ability for federal police or federal military to abduct, abuse, traffic, sell, and narco in that state. And so I just think that, we need to distance ourselves from dealing with unethical actors as much as possible. And I would put Mexico right up there in terms of close unethical actors we sell weapons to, although that could go on a long list. Fair enough. But I digress. I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's a very, very bad idea. It's kind of feeds into, it's kind of interesting only because Joe Biden's made such a mess,
We
I
gotta
believe, of
just
that
do
border
opening
already.
statements. We gotta get to other
So,
people. But
yeah,
thank you so much.
more of a mess at the border. Here we go. All right.
QB.
So I guess I'll keep it short. Yeah, so I think that we should be concerned with where the weapons end up. I don't think that given that they've already kind of found that, I think it's like 256 Marines that were involved in these kidnappings. They've already rooted those people out. They're already facing trial. Seems like they're on top of the corruption issue within the Marines. I think sending them weapons to help them against cartels or whatever is fine. In fact, I mean, I've told you guys before. I think we should do a lot more to help them fight the cartels. So I think it's totally fine. Don't really have a problem with that, and I don't really care. One of the questions on the topic was, does it matter if the same weapons are used against people on behalf of the American government, like for instance, against migrants? No, I don't think that matters. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, vote.
This is a very complex and nuanced issue that I'm sure we are all aware. And I think that the United States government is absolutely insane, given what just happened in Afghanistan. It's currently happening in Syria. It's happening all over the world. It's been happening in the Central America and South America since the 1960s and 70s, and before that too, but mostly then. We have had the biggest narco organization and the biggest terrorist organization in any of those states, and we call it the CIA. We can't possibly do worse. You know what I mean? They can't possibly do worse than we're going to do with the guns. Let's give them to them. I think it's stupid that we're even talking about such a small amount of guns. It's not very helpful. People have mentioned that there's been border fights. There's whole towns in areas of Mexico that are controlled by cartels to where they're autonomous regions essentially. The government can't get there even if they wanted to. They have shootouts on a fairly regular basis with the federales and the military even, and there's been instances where the military has been denied access to towns via gunfight. It's a very big messy situation. Weighing in on any side of it is stupid, but we're already funding at least one of the cartels and possibly more, and we've already been doing that for a long time. We've also been supporting the government, and it's just a mess of our own creation. So let's deal with it. If they need guns, give them guns. They're allies, and that's what allies are for. So I think that it's relatively cut and dry in macro, but there's a whole lot of detail here that we can argue about.
Amanda.
Yeah, so I think that we should give love and not guns. But I do just have a question. If we didn't sell them the guns, wouldn't they go somewhere else? And how, I guess, what, if we don't do it, then we don't have any control over anything, right? So.
Okay, open to the panel.
So bouncing off of that point, I guess us having an active influence in Mexico gives us a degree of control over who gets armed and who doesn't. I mean, I'm sure there's foreign powers that want to influence Mexico, but I don't think anyone has the gumption enough to really try to take advantage of the fact that Mexico is so close to us just yet. I mean, if our foreign policy continues to be generally awful, I'm sure it could happen. But I mean, the thing is, we've been doing this for over 100 years. We've been doing this for almost 150 years now, right? Maybe starting the 1880s, 1890s, we definitely started occupying foreign countries and using their resources for our gain. So us, in this case, we're sending our weapons to Mexico for the gain of their cartels being suppressed by their military. The more they fight and the more that they are focused on each other, the less we have to deal with them directly impacting our society with drugs and whatever else they want to import.
I have a few points and questions. So I think it's important to bring up that the entire west coast of the United States of America and the entire southwest of the United States of America was forcefully annexed from Mexico in 1850. So where our history, our relationship goes longer than that, and it's a history of, hey, fuck you, this is ours. The follow up kind of point there is that we've always played these places like puppet states, but I was just really curious, Revolt, you seem confident saying that we couldn't do worse than the cartels, but I've seen people get their heads. Well, sorry, really quickly. I've seen people get their heads chopped off with chainsaws. I've seen 500 people get melted in plastic bins. I think that's on the scale of things pretty fucking bad. And then also you seemed really confident saying that we were specifically funding at least one of the cartels. Did you have specific evidence that we could go over?
Like, yeah, sure, we can provide. There's like, I mean, this is like so well documented that it's like almost like it's silly to bring up evidence about this at this point. But like, yes, like the of the major cartels in Mexico, several of them have been working with the DEA and CIA and like U.S. foreign policy or U.S. State Department for years. And like they've been helping us like originally to like chase down narcos and then became narcos themselves. I think El Chapo, like his cartel, like explicitly was funded in this way. Like, and there's been multiple instances of this in Mexico and Nicaragua and Colombia. It's very well.
But are you saying that's intentional? That we were like, hey, we're going to train anti-narco
Like,
forces in the
no,
hopes that they become narcos?
well, I don't know what the intent was, and I won't ascribe it to intent. But what I will say is that it started with things like giving them guns and like doing exactly what we're doing right now. And then like eventually like that, those guns turned into enough power that they're able to leverage it into fucking breaking away from the the system that was currently there and taking advantage for themselves.
So
Like,
are
it's just
you
what happens.
just so I can get to your point, because I promise you I'm not trying to do like a 10 question
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, that's fine.
I'm just asking, like, so is your point more that like it's so messy that we're injecting ourselves into the situation kind of the same way we did to Afghanistan, where we're giving guns and money to people that we don't know whether or not we can trust, and ultimately they just become new power brokers that play into the same corruption that was there before? Was that your broader point?
My point is more so like the analogy, like like the analogy should be to Syria, and like in Syria, what we were doing was funding. We called them moderate rebels, during the Arab Spring, and like it turns out that a lot of them were Al Qaeda or and later ISIS and later like Al Shabaab and like all these other organizations, and and I think that we are dealing with that exact same thing, and we've been doing it since the 70s. Like,
Wait,
Okay, so sorry, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit confused about this analogy because we're giving these to the Mexican federal government, like we're giving them to their Marines, right? We're not just giving. This isn't the
Right.
same as giving these to unvetted groups, halfway across the world. It's giving them to ostensibly an important part of the Mexican military.
But an extremely corrupt one.
It's the
Well,
government is
Well, no, I mean,
extreme-
like it's their main force,
extremely
right? Like that's like the
corrupt.
main anti-drug forces that are getting
Okay.
the guns. And
I
I mean,
hear
yeah,
that.
like they're extremely corruptible, sure, but like they're also
no,
like
not just corruptible, but corrupt.
They're
Like, have they not
corrupted.
been like consistently infiltrated by
I mean,
by
there've
the
been
cartels
some.
and things like that?
I mean, there've been
And
some infiltrations, but like
No,
it's
no, no,
hard to
not there
tell
have
how
been some, no,
corrupt
no,
it
no,
is,
not
right?
there have been some infiltrations. It is top to bottom such that people like, let's say, a warden of a prison has to travel to work in bomb-proof vehicles. It's top to bottom. The Marines could pull him over and execute him. That's the
There
entire
were
do we
Marines
have
that
like
had
some
been doing it,
quantifiable evidence or some
but like we don't
quantifiable
know
data
Yeah,
about how
how.
Vice
corrupt
did
they
a
are?
whole
Because
has
like
done extensive reporting on how this works.
I'm
Right?
I'm not asking.
That's why
Like,
I
it
believe
was a genuine
that's why I
question.
believe Revolt Rise said it's so readily available. It's silly because even sources like Vice have hour-long delves into why these town police are actually just macro
Okay,
cartels
but
fighting
town police
bigger
are not the Mexican
cartels,
Navy and Marines, right?
fighting the military selling weaponry to these groups. It's a big conundrum. Vice has reported on this. This
Yeah.
isn't like esoteric knowledge. This isn't controversial knowledge. This is mainstream center
But
left knowledge,
But who do you
arguably.
that's the question. Okay, but this begs the question, right? So, if everybody's corrupt, the local militias are corrupt, the cops are corrupt, the federal police are corrupt, the military is corrupt, who do you sell to in order to establish physical security? And then this kind of begs the other question, because this is where I think there's a lack of analysis that would be paralleled to like Syria, Afghanistan, and all that kind of stuff. If you don't have basic needs being met, lefties love the material conditions, right? So I'm trying to give y'all some material conditions over here. If you can't afford to pay your bills, you're going to sell your pistol on the market. If you can't afford to pay your bills, you're going to sell your uniform. If you can't afford to pay your bills, you're going to be corruptible, which is part of the problem, is because if there's a perverse financial and material incentive to be corrupt, then it doesn't matter how many guns you throw at this problem. People are going to still perpetuate the same cycles that we've been perpetuating for the past 50 to 150 years.
So
It's
like,
just who is top dog, and that tends to be what we see.
and
Revolt Rise?
the answer to the material conditions thing is actually like kind of funny. Like the cartels are making so much money through human trafficking and trafficking fentanyl and whatever else they're into nowadays. Like that they are like formidable like opposition to the government. They're talking like in the tens of billions of dollars of annual revenue, like for some of these cartels. And so they've actually gone into some of these towns, right, and fixed them. Like they've built schools, they've paved roads, they pay everybody a UBI. Like the cartels are like ostensibly the government of major regions of Mexico right now.
Well, there's
Reynosa,
many states. Yes.
right? Like Reynosa, which is a city right over the border, like literally right across the border, and it is like almost completely cartel control. But like it's very nice too, and the people that live there like it. So it's like they would rather have them than the corrupt cops from the federal government. So
yeah. So what would, if we were going to tie this back to the drug war, the question kind of becomes like, God damn it, fucking boomers don't want to decriminalize, right? They don't want to legalize, right? But wouldn't decriminalization on the home front?
Yes.
And then I brought up this crazy idea before. I'm going to bring it up again. I was basically saying, like, we should bring the cartels into the fold by offering them a monopoly. Literally saying, you will sell the United States federal government X billions of dollars worth of drugs every single year. We will synthesize this into the medical market, and we will use these for like, whatever you call like the clinics, like the clinics that are used to like ease off of people of drugs or whatever. And then that way, instead of having these drug cartels that like $10 billion, our budget is $3 trillion. You know what I'm saying? We could buy off a lot of these motherfuckers. And then basically what you do is you reduce the available drug flow, you reduce the black market, you have a partner in security, you bring these people into the fold. And on top of that, from a decrim perspective, you have less people have less ready access to black market drugs. And final point, you can use the cartels since they're already power brokers, use them as power brokers to box out other cartels. And so I don't see the flaws in this idea so far.
I mean,
I think you're like, you have to be aware though that like bringing in the cartels as like a partner could have like major ramifications and can backfire like spectacularally, right? Like we'd have to be very, very cautious.
But that's why
like our approach, right?
That's why you. Sorry, go ahead.
Just what's the difference between a cartel and Coca-Cola? Like, I mean, like imagine yourself.
No, I agree. Well, the difference is that like,
one selling cocaine.
I'm gonna kind of regret saying this. I feel like,
can I? Is there a way I
may? Let Matt Latin finish his point.
Uses violence.
So, like, I mean, like, I was gonna say that the cartels engage in more direct violence, but if you look at how like Coca-Cola dealt with like union busting in East Asia, I think it was, there was like actual mercenary companies or something that was hired by the Coca-Cola company.
I think you mean Latin America.
Yeah,
was it Latin America? I don't remember where it was.
Like they were pretty big. Like they like the whole like Allende problem was like partially sponsored by either Coke or Pepsi and ITT, which was AT&T back in the day.
I mean, I might not actually have a good answer for that. Like, I don't know what the difference. I'm more thinking about cartels in terms of like foreign groups that we've worked with before, like in Afghanistan and Iraq, who then proceeded to turn around and use all the things we gave them because we were partners theoretically for a period of time, directly against us. So, and I would be more concerned because like these guys are directly on our border, and I'm not sure like how. I can't articulate exactly how it's going to backfire, right? Like I don't know the process enough.
You're gonna hate my second policy proposal even more.
All right, let's hear it. I'm ready.
Okay, so my second policy proposal is: listen, we're dealing with this porous fucking border. It's 10,000 miles long. It's a pain in the fucking balls. And on top of that, a shitload of people from Central America want to come to the United States anyways. So I'm saying I won't mean democratically if Central America, north of the Davian Gap, which is like some like geographic region in southern Panama, which is south of Panama City, if they wanted to become part of the United States so we could administer, grant them statehood, give them infrastructure, help them deal with their law enforcement problem, pretty much solve the immigration crisis overnight, and then basically treat anything north of the Davian Gap as the United States of America and treat anything south of the Davian Gap as a part of South America, then you would basically bring them into the fold and you would have full law enforcement authority while also being able to do the drug decrim solution that I talked about earlier.
I would love for this solution to work. Like,
build that wall.
Philosophically speaking, I think it would be great. However, again, the backfire, like I could see this obviously spectacularly backfiring, right?
It'll get a lot worse before it gets better. That's true.
True. I agree. I mean, that's fair. I just like we haven't been able to administrate like other countries we've occupied in a sense, and this would be an occupation, right? Like
Yeah, but
very
No.
clearly, this would be
what
us.
about
So
what if we
Even
combine
if
that?
we,
I just
Protect
wanted
it,
to I
right?
wanted to add one thing on to counterpoints before though. I agreed with almost all of your first. I remember both of your things. The first one was great, except for the co-op. We should not work with the cartels to produce the materials for, let's say, narcotics. Like a lot of times, these cartels are actually getting. There's so many various sources from usually from either South America or even in cases China overseas. There's different ways they do it. I don't think we should do that. We have a pharmaceutical industry. It's funded. It's subsidized. We have the FDA. We already pay for it. We have all this. As an example, when you go to the pharmacy, if you want to buy Sudafed, you have to sign like 3 different releases. I believe in some states you got to kind of they have a thumbprint thing. It's controlled heavily, and it is something you can buy OTC all at once. We have a system for this. Well, so if you applied this similar system and you gave like our current pharmaceutical companies arguably like an incentive, you allowed consenting adults to just buy it in like a non-criminal fashion, like you said, decriminalize, or even in cases legalize. I mean, some states would make money off of it. Even so, you would solve that problem, and I 150% agree with you because the whole thing is incentives. And if I may, just to state this very clearly, the reason you need 4 SUVs in a fucking cavalcade with machine guns is because there's this big incentive to get it across the border and sell it illegally, cut it, distribute it to other dealers, etc. Everything else they need to do to make a profit. If that incentive's removed, competed with, and then removed, it absolutely fixes the problem. So I just think we already have everything to do that, and we just need to stop sitting on our hands about adult consent and consumption of substances, and maybe the way that we view addiction and how we treat it in the criminal justice system and things like this. Like
oh,
if this all was, but I just want to say to your second point, that I don't think would work. The bringing in of everything above the Davian line as part of the United States, ultimately because of an economic problem. I fear it would lead to rapid economic expansion and to a negative degree if not done properly. So it'd have to be a very slow process.
so like going back to the Sudafed and having to give an ID. Like I remember what it was like before the ID was required for Sudafed, right?
So,
Like people were buying boxes and boxes of Sudafed and using it to make meth in the country. It has nothing to
Right.
do with the cartels. It's like
No.
local competition. So like I don't know how decriminalizing or deregulating Sudafed is going to actually help with this
No,
problem,
no, no,
right?
no, 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 no. That's not what I said. I said
Oh,
utilize a similar. Excuse me. Maybe I wasn't clear. Utilize a similar system to
okay.
sell things like cocaine or I mean, these things were medicines. Heroin was a medicine,
Okay.
not the
I see what you're
best medicine, whatever. But these chemicals can actually be refined, and all the garbage can be taken out. They can be made in labs. They can be made relatively safe. I mean, what's safe mean when you're talking about controlled substances and narcotics? We have
That's
Xanax.
the
I'm just excuse me really quickly. We have Xanax. We have all these things. If we had a similar system for these drugs, you remove the incentive structure to bring in these big bricks and distribute them to God knows where using God knows what is a cut like fentanyl, leading to overdoses, leading to dead people, leading to addiction. You can regulate it and not have such a problem. You remove all that incentive, and the prices wouldn't be. I mean, geez, yeah, it's an
no,
entire waste of money.
we might be closer, but we probably don't agree on decrim versus legalize. I'm a decriminalization person. I don't call it a knee jerk reaction. Call it me being a fucking conservative. I don't want people to recreational do cocaine, methamphetamine, or heroin, even if they're adults. Okay, but let's put that aside. I don't think that we're that far off from like a solution thing. And on top of that, like I don't necessarily want to go down this argument tree because what it boils down to is you were talking about like incentives and incentive structures. I would want to bring the cartels into the fold because they already have the infrastructure and the power. If you did a one-time payoff, like kind of like the meme from like Trailer Park Boys, where it's like, I'm gonna pay you $100 to fuck off. Well, guess what? Like somebody's gonna come fill that void the following year. Whereas if you maintain the infrastructure, like kind of bring them as like, I don't know, pharmaceutical what do they call that? Like commodity producers, where they're giving raw materials to the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry is creating the legitimate medicines, like local anesthetic out of the cocaine substance, and basically like whatever the morphine out of the opium product. Then you have the legitimate need. You fulfill the financial and power needs of the cartel, and then basically who gets anybody out of line, you can kill. Now, by the way, I know this idea is unpopular. I know that annexing Central and South America down to the Davian Gap is not going to be something that I see in my lifetime. I also know that decriminalization within my lifetime is a tall order at best. I'm just trying to like orient the conversation towards what we think would actually solve the problem. Because obviously, if we just throw guns at the Mexican military and federal police for another century, we're in 2050, our great grandkids are going to be on a different panel show having the same conversation about what we do about Mexico.
About how do we fight the
I mean,
war.
and the thing is, though, like I think that's
That
the
sounds
point,
like
right?
that sounds like a failure on our part, not to warn our kids
Well,
not to
no, I think
make
that's
our
like the
same
whole
mistakes. To be on panel shows. But yeah, okay, sure. Let's go. We can go down this. But I do want to like explore the idea of just like arms sales in general, and not just get caught up in specifically U.S. Mexican politics, but just like should we care about these things, and what does it mean for a organization to necessarily be corrupt, right? Because Fanatic, I think it was Fanatic, who's someone was getting maybe to this point, right? Talking about like the numbers of people who've been implicated, but then maybe they're also arresting those people, also processing those people. How does it like what counts as actually corrupt, right? So do you want to like move on to that rather than just like have a topic on drugs?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I can kick us off. Basically, what I would say is that's the problem, is like rooting people out, and then whether or not the people who follow in their footsteps are corrupt, and then always having a rooting system that's perpetual. If you go like, oh well, we arrested 256 Marines for being a part of like a drug ring and a kidnapping ring, and then like 10 of them are like, oh shit, those guys get caught, but I'm smarter than those motherfuckers. Then 5 years from now, you're going to be doing the same shit. So you have to keep the pressure, the social pressure, on these institutions to not be corrupt. And the primary way that you do this, so the reason why the Marines were picked in the first place is because as a part of the Department of Defense, they did not have the same chain of command as law enforcement, and law enforcement was viewed as particularly corrupt. So what you have to do again is have these social institutions check each other, where federal law enforcement is capable of arresting corrupt Marines, and corrupt Marines are capable of arresting and killing corrupt law enforcement. And then you pit these social institutions against each other, and then the fear of the other drives them to be more honest than they are right now.
What's the difference between that and gang warfare?
Law, courts, rules of engagement,
But if
liability.
But
Wait,
at that
no,
point,
where's the corrupt?
we may as well send in like special forces, man. If we're doing all of these backflips, just to
We already do.
Wait,
We
also,
do.
if we're funding them,
Yeah.
we're not
think-
making them
I'm not-
follow the rules and laws, right? This isn't like okay, but it has to be no. If we give them money and give them guns, we know that they're not just going to be, oh, okay, well, I'm only going to use the guns in a law-abiding way, right? Like I think Revolt has an excellent point that this sounds a lot like it could turn into like gang warfare, but at a much larger scale, since we're going to be pumping in much more money.
I don't disagree with you, Connor, that like we're like backs against the wall on the issue as far as like there's really only a very narrow window of acceptable solutions here at all. I just think that we should err in ways of like, okay, what do the cartels do? Like they're corporations. Like let's like help them to become corporations instead of like helping them to continue to do bad things. You know what I mean? Like I think that like they're really close. In fact, there's like it's been a rumor. I don't know if it's substantiated in any way, but there's been like a rumor that one of the cartels took over an abandoned or like an old Ford manufacturing plant and is making Ford cars illegally, like illegally licensed Ford cars again. Like I don't know if that's true, but it certainly seems feasible, and like they make enough money to make that kind of thing happen, and like that's the kind of shit we're dealing with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I want to address this this
copy Fords.
Yeah, I want to address this corruption angle though, because it's something that we deal with, and it's something that I advocate for local law enforcement as well. So local law, I served in local law enforcement for 4 years in Central Florida, and I brought this up in the past. I'll bring it up in the future. Everybody is scared shitless of state troopers. The reason why they're scared of state troopers is because state troopers will arrest other cops. They are specifically instructed that they are the people who check on other cops. So if you do domestic violence, if you're speeding as a cop in your off-duty vehicle, if you're taking off-duty jobs, if you're caught, there's none of that thin blue line shit where you like flash your badge and then the other cop walks away. When it comes to state cops, they will fucking fry your ass. And if you look at the way like the state police have actually been unpopular with local law enforcement because of this exact reason. But this is how you check power and you keep people honest. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to create a gang war. I'm not trying to create a gang war between the Mexican Marines and federal law enforcement. What I am trying to do is I'm trying to think that like young Mexican Marines who need money in their pocket, they're thinking about starting a kidnapping ring. They say, fuck that. I'm not going to do that. Fucking my boy Jose tried to do that fucking 5 years ago. He's fucking serving a life sentence. And then the same thing with the federal police. They're like, I'm not going to get wrapped up in cartels because at some point in the next 5 years, the Mexican Marines are going to fucking kick in my door and they're either going to kill me or they're going to haul me off to prison. So I'm not doing that. So we're talking about incentives and we're talking about power checking power. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, I just fear as I said, I can only sound like a broken record basically and say I fear that it's so corrupt that it's almost better to not involve ourselves. You have investors alleged in various circumstances to be involved, like at the magnitude of Carlos Slim. You can do a quick search on him and you'll kind of understand the magnitude I'm speaking of. You're talking about a guy you would never know or not know. I mean, he, billions and billions of dollars of investments and allegations and et cetera. I don't think it's a good idea for us to put our noses in it. And that's all. I can only sound like a broken record. I think it's a bad idea to intervene. I think it's a good idea to remove the incentive structure by just deregulating and incentivizing our own markets to produce those things. And we'll produce way better variants that don't have, excuse me, that was gross, nearly the same issues. Um, and I think that would be better for everybody. And I think consenting adults are ready for that in 2021. I understand your position where you're like, well, I don't think people should be doing that recreationally. Well, the truth of the matter is they're going to, and the problem is it incentivizes these nefarious forces to continue to be a problem and to congeal at the southern border and to then just sort of congeal throughout the country as a negative drug problem. I mean, yeah, you can deal with addiction and you have to, but let's remove the incentives from these people. That's for sure. That's how I feel about it.
But I mean, there's evidence that as these drugs have been legalized or decriminalized, they just move to different industries. Like right now, like sex trafficking is like their third biggest product right now, or for a lot of these cartels.
I think the first one is just moving people in general up the border.
Yeah. And then it's I think it's drugs, and the third one is sex trafficking,
specifically for prostitution.
Yeah.
Well, but you could argue that Nevada. But you could argue, bro. You could argue that Nevada is an example of fighting that too. They regulated. The police have close ties with the brothels. These girls are regularly medically checked and regulated. It's a whole thing that creates a more healthy environment for that
but if the answer is just to legalize all the shitty industries that the cartels are involved in, I mean, like that seems kind of weird.
Legalize
it seems a lot better.
I'm not sure. Wait, why is that woke, though, right?
It makes a lot more sense to me.
You're talking about
rather than just let
Doopy finish, please.
Rather than just accepting that this corruption is going to exist and the cartels are going to exist, we're willing to send troops and bombs to the other side of the fucking world to get rid of these sorts of things, right? These bad actors in other places. Why not do that south of our border? The very close country, very unstable. Why not send the American military down there with the blessing of the Mexican government, hopefully, to wipe these people out and stabilize the government?
You know what happened the last time the American military invaded Mexico?
I'm not talking about
like
invasion of
10
Mexico.
different there were 10 different factions all at war with each other simultaneously, and they all grouped together and became anti-America. Like straight up,
I'm
they
not
all
talking about
unified
an
and allied
invasion
to
of
deal with
Mexico. I'm not talking about conquering.
I'm just saying,
I'm talking about sending the American military into Mexico to get rid of these cartels. Yeah, hopefully. I'd hope they want to get rid of these cartels.
What happens if Mexico says no, we don't want your military?
Well, at some point, At some point, this virus they have is doing damage to our country and our people. So we need to cut it
So
out.
we want to unify the federales and the cartels against us, is what you're suggesting in that case.
I would
it
rather
doesn't even
that.
have to be
Hey,
that
you
dramatic.
know what? That actually makes a lot of sense, Madeline. And if we were to unify them against us, at least now that we would be able to have a more like realistic threat that we can actually work with and recognize as a problem, right? Because as it stands now, there's like I feel like there's this like almost like like we look at the Mexican government as if like it's supposed to be like this legitimate thing, but then it seems like they're constantly illegitimate because of like the infiltration from the cartels and stuff like that.
Yo,
So then
it's
this would
the
be like
15th biggest economy on the planet. Like, and I'm not saying like
what does
I
that
think
have
we're
to do with what I just
overemphasizing
said?
how
Does that have
like
literally
yeah,
anything
things
to
are
do with what I
bad.
just said?
Yeah, well, like you're
No,
like
But
we
I
had
didn't think
problems
so. Okay,
invading
you're just
Iraq and
talking.
Afghanistan, and now you're talking about invading Mexico. That's what you just
Yeah,
suggested. It was like a
the,
good
the
idea.
parallels.
It'll give us a concrete threat to work against. Well,
There's a
it's a
difference.
hell of a concrete threat to work against in
There's a
comparison to a few
difference.
cartels underneath the border.
There's a difference between an invasion and working with another country and like providing like aid. We've been in Japan since like 1940 something, right?
Okay.
Like and we're still there, right?
So did I
Like there's a very
misunderstand what
big
you were
difference in
saying?
that.
What was your proposal then?
What Doobie was saying was working with the freaking Mexican
Okay.
government to and I was just saying what he was saying made sense.
But the
Okay,
problem
Working
is
with
if
the
the
Mexican government
Mexican
to deal with the
government
cartels.
if the Mexican government invited us in, which they probably wouldn't, but if they
They do.
did, I could see Doobie's point working. The question is, what if the Mexican government has no interest in this?
I think
Let's go
Doobie
down that
has a
rabbit hole.
clear
They
answer.
have a lot of interest in it, but the cartels have no interest in it, and the cartels like run the, you know what I mean, like have like puppets
Yeah.
like in the government. But like that's not even the issue. The issue is the thing that I said in the first place was the fact that like there's a lot of parts of Mexico where the material conditions of the people that like live there have been substantially like improved, like third world to first world. Like they have cable TV now, and like before they lived in like with no windows in their house. You know what I mean? And like those conditions have been met by the cartels. Like
Bro,
the heart and mind problem.
in some of these villages, they've established working water systems, cartel work crews.
Right.
Like this is what it is. So these people are on the ground making life better, but then the federales are saying these are the villains, these are the enemies of the state.
Yeah.
That's not a situation, in my opinion, that we should go guns blazing into. Invite or
Yeah,
no
But
invite
that
or no
doesn't.
invite. It's not something that should be
Okay,
our
but the similar
prerogative.
things exist, and like it's not new for criminal organizations to pay off or to make the lives of the communities that they're operating in very easy, so they can fuck up communities away from them, right?
Yeah.
So it happens here in the United States. We have gangs that they'll give some money to the local communities so they don't rat them out to the police. When the mafia was really big in the United States, they did the same kind of shit. That didn't keep us from going after them. But the reality is, these are massive criminal organizations that are doing a lot of damage, not just to Mexico, but to our country and our people. And I don't think we should maybe we can encourage the Mexican government to do something for their fucking people, so they're not susceptible to being bribed basically by these cartels. And maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. I'm not really concerned with that. What I'm concerned about with is the damage being done to our people, right? So if that means we need to convince Mexico to let us come in and wipe out these cartels for them, then let's do it.
I mean, it's a civil war, right? Like
I
this is like
agree.
literally us
No,
getting
but, like,
involved. It's like
beyond
a
that,
low key civil war, right? Like
I'll agree with you, Doobie, as long as we can also bomb like mobile oil, like you know, like and the people that have been polluting and like fucking robbing and stealing, and like the corporations that have been doing evil shit to our country. Like, I mean, if that's your sentiment, we're gonna go after it. Like,
Well,
let's
hold
go
on. There are a lot of corporations that do a lot of really disgusting shit that I think should be nationalized and taken over by the U.S. government. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that run them should be
Yeah,
in
well
prison.
then you're on that
100%.
island. You're on that
okay,
island
so
solo.
cartels. Like,
okay, all right. So I don't know how much of that was troll and how much of that was. I'm just gonna focus on like I actually agree with RV on like a bunch of things. Like I think we could have like a controlled legalization of like a bunch of substances to remove like the market for these cartels. I understand that the cartels will switch their industry, obviously, and we'll just have to look at what the next frontier is. But I think if we're like looking for direct solutions to this problem specifically, I think that's definitely one of the solutions. We'd probably have to do something multifaceted. Getting directly involved in what's effectively like a low-key civil war is like disastrous in my opinion. I think, in fact, our goal on some level,
I
as
don't
far
think
as
that's
policy
all.
goes,
Can
like we're not
I-
going to acknowledge this. Like I don't think we're going to acknowledge this at all. But I think as far as our policy goes, I think like the plan here is to do what Counterpoints was suggesting was like, the worst case scenario, which is in 50 years, we're still talking about this. Like, I think that's like probably what policymakers are looking at as like the most workable solution to this problem. Like, I don't think they're thinking, hey, we can solve this. I think they know that they can't solve it, and they're just trying to figure out like what kind of line to toe that's like sustainable.
Yeah, and I want to back up Detsy real quick because I love coming up with like elaborate, beautiful solutions that would totally work, but nobody wants to fucking do. That's one of my favorite things to do. But at the same time, what decriminalization or like legalization does is it's something controllable, it's immediate, it's within the borders of the country. It could ameliorate a variety of the externalities that are common in Mexico without getting us involved in a shooting war or building some kind of popularity for annexing all the way down to Panama or something like that. And I think a lot of this could be achieved through decriminalization, but that's like a different debate. So that's where, as much as I hate to admit it, I like it because it's smaller, it's within scope, it's within the government's control, it's within popular control, and it doesn't start a fucking shooting war in a different society with a different language that probably would resent foreign interference. And also, I'm volunteering. I was in the military too. One of the things that frustrates me is when we're very gung-ho about violence, but we're volunteering somebody else to participate in that violence. If somebody was like an 18-year-old on this panel and they were like, oh yeah, I'm enlisting in the military, I'm just coming here to bullshit about politics for a little bit, and I'm all about invading, I'd be like, all right, fuck it, you're gonna put your money where your mouth is. But I think it's weird when we're super cavalier about like bloody conflicts that we ourselves do not have to participate in.
For the record, Connor, I own a piece of property that crosses the border, like right outside of Reynosa. So I've got a little bit of skin in the game, personally.
And if I can just say, I had cited at the beginning of the whole spiel that, in fact, just recently and not long ago, and I just denoted it happened under an Obama and Biden presidency, which is, I don't know how of note that is, but it did, where they shot directly into Texas. We're talking 50 caliber, they think, tracer rounds flying over the border visibly. This was the new one, but back then it happened too. It was again like a clone story. You can go to 2014.
Yeah.
I actually have an article link if anyone wants both of them, because it's interesting. It's like, wow, this every few years we get a couple, a burst of machine gun fire flying into our country.
It was in celebration of opening a new DHS office, like on the American side. Seriously.
Yeah, right. Like a big fu to us. Like okay, thanks guys. Yeah, shoot some fucking 50 BMG into our brand new concrete.
And they have them too. They have armored personnel carriers. They've got like Chinese versions of MRAPs. They are showing up there now. They've got real machine guns. They've got I think I saw like that they had like tow like anti-tank missiles. Like real shit is going from all the places that we've left it around the world and coagulating and like coalescing into the hands of that guy.
But now you're pushing me back towards Doobie again, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're telling you all the reasons we need to do what I was suggesting. Some of the people that were kidnapped by these corrupt Marines were American citizens. Right?
Yeah, and
No, and I get you, but I want to say, and to counterpoints, I want to nip it in the bud. That's the thing. That's my whole thing. Is I'm here sounding the alarm, saying, listen, let consenting adults do it. Give the pharma industry it. It is within scope. It is within reason. The FDA exists. We already fund it. All the stuff is there to produce it. We already produce a lot of these analogs already. You can name a whole dozen and a half drugs that would replace these and so if you just offer if you just offer these things to consenting adults in a regulatory fashion, even that I would concede to remove that incentive. Absolutely, right. We need to do that before.
But we're not even
just real quickly anymore. Hold on, can I just want to back up Doobie though real quick. So my thing is though, I want to bring people into the fold and I want to go the diplomatic route and I want to focus on what we can control and all that kind of stuff. But when you have non-state actors with missile launchers, belt-fed guns and all that kind of stuff who are acting with impunity, that's a fucking problem to me. So either those people need to be brought into the fold or they need to be fucking broken. You can't tolerate that kind of shit. What I wouldn't want is I wouldn't want to have this fucking half and half deal where we decriminalize or legalize, but then Mexico is still a failed narco state where all of the people in power who are honest are liable to be kidnapped and murdered based off of the whim of drug kingpins. That's not a tolerable situation either. So the drug kingpins would either need to come into the fold or we would need to go after them. So fuck that is what I have to say about that.
What if we tighten our borders enough to remove our concern of the incentive structure? Like, I mean, yeah, there's always going, like as you said, I mean, basically until we pursue every single drug cartel across the face of the earth, there will be incentive structures that abuse a minority to sell these things. And it won't just be narcotics either, sure. But if we cut it as much as possible, kind of in spirit of what Doobie's alluding to, just not in the same way. We cut the incentive, I believe that, and we tighten up the border. Well, then there's your solution.
Unfortunately, I feel like we're living in an increasingly globalized world, and an isolationist, like very strict border controlled policy. It just doesn't seem to be the way we're going. I'm not saying that it wouldn't work out from like a theoretical perspective. I'm just saying it based off of our current political class. They seem to talk about like immigration issues and border controls and all that kind of shit, and they don't do anything about it. So I think they're kind of okay with the status quo. And I don't think there's enough popular will on the ground to have that level of force implemented as far as the border control. I just don't think there is.
Wait, so just really, I feel like a lot of the things being proposed are like, again, you're accepting that there's going to be corruption. You're accepting that the cartels are going to exist and that they're going to be in control in some way. And to just kind of put a needle in this, right? I think it was like 2019, or like last year, assumption. It was like a couple years ago or something. There was a standoff between, I think, the Sinaloa cartel and the Mexican military because they had taken Al Chapo's son.
By
And they're going to arrest him. And in response, the Sinaloa cartel had guys going up and down the streets with their fucking grenade launchers and their machine guns and all this shit. And they told the Mexican military that if they didn't release him, they were going to kill people at random. They took a bunch of soldiers and their families hostage, and they said they're going to fucking shoot up the entire town if they didn't release him. And they released him. They gave in because they had to.
They gave in though, Doobie. Why'd they give in?
Because they had no other choice. If there were the alternative was they have a lot of dead innocent people.
Yeah, right. So they don't want to fight the fight you want to fight. That's the point.
No,
I'm making.
I think they need support to fight the fight that I want to fight, right? And I'd like to support them as their neighbor to the north, as their ally. They're dealing with violent actors within the nation, totally fucking lawless that have run ramshot all over their fucking country. We should definitely help these people. We'd help any other ally.
But
I don't understand.
But
If this was happening in the UK, I think people would be okay with it. I'm starting to think that there's something about
100%.
Mexico. That there's something about Mexico, right, that makes people like have an aversion to sending in troops to help them get boots on the ground.
Well, you know what it is, Doobie, because I know what you're poking at.
Well, we've interfered in Latin American affairs a lot.
Well, yeah, but there's kind of like a cultural presumption that this is just the way it is. Like I'm not gonna lie, like when you bring all that shit up, where you're like, if the UK was being run by criminal gangs that were funding off of drugs and kidnapping and murder, we absolutely would intervene. I think you're right. And I do think that it's probably since I was born and a generation before I was born, Mexico was just like a failed narco state, and it's hard to imagine it in a different way. So the amount of heavy lifting that you're asking of me, it's kind of like it just feels like fighting nature almost.
Well, no, I also
hold on.
I would add to that.
I'm gonna say it. I was hinting at it before. I think that there is an assumption here that there is a cultural issue in Mexico's population that leads to them being more susceptible to this kind of corruption, this kind of behavior. Maybe it's because they're brown. I don't know why you guys think this exists, but there's something there, and I feel like we're dancing around this, and this is why we're just assuming that it's going to be. Then there's nothing we can do about it.
No, I mean I agree. Like I was about to say, like I think there's like a sort of bias in terms of like what we consider who's going to be like reliable, right? Like we don't, as a culture, respond to Mexico thinking, oh yeah, these are reliable partners that we can work with to solve problems. We are used to managing their affairs and not like working with them as equals, basically. And I think that's like a big part of why there's like this idea that, I mean, popularly speaking, why there's this idea that we can't work with Mexico to do these things. But like, obviously the U.S. government disagrees because we're sending the Mexican Navy and Mexican Marines arms to fight the cartels. And I think there's like some sort of like undercurrent that we're not aware of, where we are working with the Mexican government to deal with specific cartels and leaving other cartels alone.
So this idea that Counterpoint's introduced I think there's definitely something to it in that. Just I'm not culturally, maybe I don't know, maybe within the media, within like our current understanding of the world, um, like we imagine some places and some people as deserving of violence, right? That's just kind of like how it is, and you don't. And there's like no other way around it, right? And like other places, like deserving like a poverty, right? So you hear of something in some African nation, right? Of a famine. It's like, well, it's like an environmental hazard, you know? It's like, well, it snows some places, right? It floods in other places, and some places have famines, and that's just the way it is. And there's nothing that can be done. But I mean, there is something, you know, we could actually do something, right? We could actually step in and make those things happen.
Well, if we were given permission to, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's the other thing is we have a history of sending our military to dominate.
So hold on, sure.
Yeah.
And I
It's that.
and I hear that, but like I disagree with Doobie on one thing here, or probably many things, but one thing here is that like we are funding the cartels, right? We're saying like are gonna step in and solve this issue, but like what's the issue? The issue is that American consumers are consuming these drugs, right? We are their number one buyer. But we're gonna step in and then turn your streets into a fucking war zone. Like I don't know if I was the average citizen, right, like Mexican citizen, and I caught in the middle of this, why would I want that? Why would I want that? Especially with how you guys are painting it. I haven't heard of this before, but the cartel stepping in and becoming the government. But like I completely believe it. It makes complete sense that would happen. And that they certainly have the capability to do it because again we're giving them billions of dollars. Like that
Price has reported
that spend,
on it. Yep.
yeah, that what goes up our nose, right? Like yeah. So I understand that, but the average citizen, why would they want that? Why would they want what Doobie is proposing is to send more troops? Why would they want that? Instead, they want a peaceful existence. They want to be able to walk the streets and not be victimized, right? I think they would prefer. I'm assuming they would prefer a government not necessarily run by criminals who could arbitrarily change their minds about like the laws that they're living under. Right? I would assume they would prefer that, but they would also not like bombs to start falling on them, right?
Yeah, but they've had like actual incidents in which like the cartels have taken entire buses of children.
Yeah.
I would imagine that they would probably be on board with some sort of intense response to whatever if it was something that was feasible. It's just I think they know at this point that their government is not capable because bro, it's the cartel has been OD in Mexico. Like they've done nonsense. They've literally massacred entire towns of people. Bro, they're kind of gross.
I just want to the one thing I'll say then counterpoints you can take away is that I think we just should be careful of they, right? Like, what do the American people want, right? What do the Mexican people want? I think it's highly dependent on where you're living, which cartel you're living under, right? What your experience are with the federal government, with the local police, which, like you guys have said, is just corrupt up and down, right? So I think you have to be very careful as to what the Mexican people want and what they consider as possible. I think the people in Mexico City proper, right, with like the stranglehold the government has on that, would have different ideas than living in bumfuck whatever is. I don't even know the states. So, but like, yeah. So, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, actually, what's interesting. So, you were saying that we conceptualize some people of like deserving of violence. For me, it's not deserving of violence. It's kind of like people who are perpetually fucked. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like I want people to hurt. It's not that I want people to live in these situations. It just seems like there's a whole bunch of variables that we're not capable of controlling. So it's hard to become emotionally invested, which sucks because this isn't Narnia. This isn't a fantasy world. This is a real place with real people who have real problems. And then to kind of back that up, with what Fanatic was saying is like there are non-corrupt politicians and non-corrupt police who make a big stink about how they're going to clean up the system, and then they end up either paid off or killed. And like there's dozens of stories of like mayors or police chiefs. Yeah, so like mayors, like imagine like just in your fucking city, the mayor's like, hey, listen, we got a cartel and a drug problem. I'm gonna do something about it. And then like 3 weeks later, they're literally in a ditch on the side of the road with a couple of holes in the back of their head. That's a reality in Mexico. So that's kind of where for me, Doobie, like I'm so torn between these two perspectives because on one hand, I want to go with what's like feasible, immediate, sensible, intelligent, what we can control and what will solve the problem inside the United States. And on the other hand, with like Doobie, where it's like, that is not a tolerable, sustainable lifestyle where a politician says, I'm going to root out corruption and I'm going to prevent gangs from running our city. And then 2 days later, they're dead. That like that's where for my empathy goes back to Doobie, where the violence might be awful, but the result would be worth it if you created a society in which like teachers, cops, and politicians weren't murdered whenever they try to stand up for against corruption. So I am absolutely fucking torn in this subject.
Well, I mean, we can do both, right? Like a big part of it is removing their funding. Like we should be legalizing these drugs so they don't have the funding to begin with, and it'll make their effectiveness in this regard, like killing politicians, less because they have to pay people to do this work, right?
Doobie, then Reverie.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So Connor, like you said, you want to do what's reasonable, what's realistic. So first off, your solution was that we take everything down to the daring gap, which is way less realistic.
Yeah, it's wildly unpragmatic.
Yeah, and secondly, what's interesting to me is we, from lefties typically, we get this like kind of sob story when migrants show up at the border, or they send caravans of children to the border. Oh, we got to let them in. They're trying to escape this violence and the drug wars and all this kind of shit. And that's true. It's true that they're trying to escape this. They want a better life. But and you guys are willing to let these people into the country, but you're not willing to help them back home where they actually fucking need the help. Do you think they want to make this trek to the United States where they don't know anybody? They don't know the fucking language. They don't know anything about the society. I'm sure they'd rather stay in their countries and build their lives there. But they can't because they have this fucking drug war happening.
With these
cartels
happening to
these cartels
free their
running
country
everything.
from the cartels.
So yeah, in the short term, things will get worse if we do this. But in the long term, we won't have people coming to our country, fleeing violence every fucking day.
But you're talking about.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Doobie. Like, I think that's like a general. I think that's like actually somewhat principled. But like,
he's
at the end of the day,
war. Sorry, no, he's talking about war all through that. Not just Mexico now. Like all through Latin America. Right. It's not just like Mexican cartels doing this.
But
right?
those wars criminal are us helping. That's what it looks like when we help. Like they're fleeing our help.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like
I mean, that's true. So my point is, like, in some sort of ideal world where like we're the good guys and we charge in and we're gonna fight the cartels and everything's gonna be fine. Like this sounds great, but like what's gonna happen? We're gonna send our forces over there, and it's just gonna make matters worse for an unknown period of time. We don't know if it's going to be over in 3 months or if it's going to be 20 years and we're going to bring our troops home and the country is going to go back to the cartels after the fact, right? Like we have no idea what our capacity is at nation building in the first place. So it's outrageous to say, oh, hey, we should invade Mexico, fuck the cartels. We can put them in the caves. They're going to be gone. And then we don't have to worry about immigration anymore because we've rebuilt the country. We couldn't even rebuild a much smaller country. Like Afghanistan was, in the bottom,
on the other side of the planet
economically. Like how are we going to rebuild Mexico?
Vastly different. Like that, they're not.
How are we going to rebuild Mexico?
They're not comparable. They're just not
different
comparable.
cultures. You know why all the Central American states and South America are all broken up, right? Like they try to build Gran Colombia. They try to build all of Central America, but they couldn't culturally agree on what government to have, so they broke up into little itty bitty states. Like talking about culture and like some sort of like top down like thing, it's just not going to work.
That's a remnant of the United States. They decided what they wanted. They wanted socialist, and then the United States bombed them into little teeny tiny fiefdoms that fight with each other.
Oh, come on. I want to address this.
That is not...
No. That is literally true.
Okay,
let's talk about like which country would you contest that's been the case for? Because like nearly every single one that has tried to have
we're talking like straight after the Spanish Revolution, right?
Like
we're talking about like
from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and
I'm talking about like literally like from the 1800s right now, right? Like I'm talking about like Simón Bolívar was like, I want Gran Colombia, I want Colombia, Venezuela, Panama, Ecuador, and Peru, all one massive country, right? Yeah. And then they couldn't agree on anything and they broke up. Like it's been like this whole. Now I don't disagree with you. Yes, the United States will approach a
Get the
country that seems
flags.
to be a serious threat and undermine their government. That's absolutely true. Fine, yes, but I mean, it's just not. It's not just us. It's like there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, can I
Sure.
back up Mad Latin here real quick? So Revolt, like I appreciate you. I think you're a smart dude. And I'm not trying to talk shit, but like the my problem when I'm talking to leftists about like the CIA in particular is like they're just like these like nefarious, like omnipotent psychic
not-
demons. Hold on,
Before you go
while
down the Twitter-
simultaneously being bumbling fucking idiots. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm not just an average Twitter leftist. Like I've literally spent
Sure.
like years of my life researching this topic, and I've like got a book that's been I have a publishing deal on it, and it's coming out. You can read it yourself. But like before you go and like meme me about what I think, I like I'm very aware of like what the facts as close as we can assemble them are in these situations.
Okay, so let's see if we can agree on some level of reality. Okay, so basically, I'm trying to bridge the gap between like Mad Latin's perspective and your perspective, which is basically like, yes, the CIA in the United States has been fucking around in Central and South America for the past like century and a half. Nobody's disputing that, but the CIA is 6 assholes with a briefcase of fucking money. If 6 assholes with a few $1 million in a fucking briefcase can fuck up your country, then there was probably something going on to begin with. Can we agree on that approximately?
I mean,
No, we can't.
I mean, like
Iran Contra was way more substantial than a bunch of assholes with suitcases, right?
No,
Like,
I mean, so it's funny that Counterpoint's brought this up. Actually,
that's the
speaking of
perfect
assholes with
example,
suitcases,
actually.
like the whole Russian government, like 1917, like the Russian Revolution, the 1st of February Revolution and the October Revolution, were all brought down by just a few individuals doing stupid shit, right? Like it was literally like outright ineptitude. And like, yeah, I agree. Like the societal structures were like completely bad to begin with on some level, and that's why this whole catastrophe could happen to Russia, for example. But like, yeah, like it could be like any country that could like experience this. Like, I don't think it has to be a shit. A country with like a shit government.
Do you think the United States could be destroyed by 6 assholes with a fucking briefcase?
Depending on the year.
Depending
on the year, that's a good point.
Depending on the year, like I'm not saying like now.
I kind of, and Doobie, I see him, and I'll go. If I Doobie go first, and then I'm gonna say what I gotta say, Doobie.
Okay, so I'm still the quote unquote progressives on this panel. It seems like the solution you guys are proposing is that we legalize all the awful vices that these gangs peddle in. We legalize it, bring that into our society.
I mean, I don't know if this is the progress. Like,
I don't. Wait, no, I'm not done speaking. I'm not done speaking. So legalize all that shit to take away their sources of funding, but all those things are going to be very lucrative, so they're still going to be getting funding, and I'm sure they'll still be doing all the other illegal shit that they're doing. So that's probably not a good solution. And then secondly, again, when these people show up at the border begging for our help, you want to help them, but you're not willing to do what needs to be done to help them back home. Yes, it'll be difficult at the start. Yes, things will get worse. But like it's like with medicine, right? You got to take the bitter pill, you got to swallow the bitter medicine to get better in the long run. And
if we're selling bags of Coke at the grocery store for $1, I don't think it's going to be lucrative anymore. That's the point.
Also, the thing about it being lucrative and stuff, right, is it's not us letting in the super harmful stuff. The super harmful stuff is all the gang violence and murder and deaths and stuff, right? If they were just legitimate drug businesses that sold drugs, that's not importing the vices. The vices that I think a lot of us really care about are the death and destruction that comes along with cartels, not the drugs themselves.
No, that's not true.
I care about
ask any of these people in fucking Chicago or the Midwest, where their communities are being ravaged by fucking crack and meth and shit and heroin. If they care about the violence happening south of the border, no, they care about people dying in their communities because they're getting addicted to drugs. That's
what happens in their communities too, right? A lot of the problems with violence and stuff can be solved in those communities as well. With
who is importing the crack and the heroin? Like just to steal my point, and like seriously, this is yes, the drug gangs were, and that is true. Before the drug gangs, and the CIA was right. Like we know that for a fact now. Like this is my point. We keep fucking with it over and over again, and like I'm wondering why it doesn't work. And it's like it doesn't work.
So you okay?
Can I don't. Is that what the book is about?
Like
no.
Okay.
Okay, so hold on. So Revolt and RV, you guys have both said things like these are established facts that we all know about. And you're saying that after saying something that like shocks me to my core on some level. I don't disagree that the CIA is like, you know, beyond like importing drugs or whatnot, but like I don't feel like this is common now. Like, what article do you have to like just
There's like
introduce me to this world that is
if
There's an entire-
you're
Oh,
citing
oh,
Gary
level
Webb,
vote,
we're
level
not
vote.
gonna.
I'm not gonna
respond.
like Gary Webb was a journalist who covered this, but like, there's an entire section in Wikipedia called "Allegations of CIA Drug Trafficking" that has like some sourcing and like that has been like these are allegations here that are serious allegations that have been like backed up by either direct testimony or direct evidence like that has been substantiated over a number of years and is like substantial. Like there's like
I don't
we've been
agree with
doing
this.
this
Usually,
since
no. If I
Hong
if
Kong.
Yeah, if I may, usually what it is for some context, you can doubt it all you want, but for some context, usually it's like a splinter cell, if you will, a splinter off of like, you know, an organization. So you have like the, you know, the DEA doing something nefarious with drugs, but really it's 6 guys or 12 guys working together to do something, you know, something like Fast and Furious. It's I mean,
okay.
this is
So I'm looking at this link that Revolt sent me to, right? Like CIA drug trafficking. U.S. officials said in 1990 the anti-drug unit of the CIA accidentally shipped a ton of cocaine into the United States from Venezuela as a part of an effort to infiltrate and gather evidence on drug gangs. This
Yeah.
cocaine was sold on the streets of the United States. No criminal charges were made in this incident.
Right. Oliver
So
North testified about Iran Contra, and like in that testimony that he gave, the public version of it, like he says that there was an element of the organization that was moving drugs from Nicaragua to the United States, like for a substantial period of time, like for a period
Okay,
of
can I
we
can
say
I
that this is like, so the
yeah
implication here is that this is like the CIA intentionally trying to spread drugs in the United States, while the CIA's version, the government's version, is that this is to infiltrate the gangs and like remove them from
and
the
can
street.
I don't know.
can
Hold
I
on, hold
address
on,
this Revolt
hold on.
before you
I
respond?
do want to say something. And I look, I've seen things, I've heard things about the subject of the CIA putting drugs in certain communities. Right. I can't say like I can't say for sure one way or the other. Honestly, I can't. I can't do that. But like there like understanding that we have this U.S. government that's gone so far as to assassinate, as to arrest, as to frame, as to like do use almost every tool in its ability, right, to destroy black empowerment movements, right? Like to use the state against a certain community, right? Because they looked at them as a threat, right? As like a terrorist organization working within our borders. So is it impossible that those same organizations, same quote unquote law enforcement agencies could do something to destabilize the community that they seem to dislike so much, right? That could they have put crack on our streets? Yeah, I think it is. I think it's possible. Again, I don't have proof. I don't have proof. I have seen proof, but like I don't know. I don't have enough proof to like beyond a shadow of a doubt. This is what the CIA is doing. I don't have that.
Can I?
But I'm just saying.
Yeah,
it's not an unreasonable
guys?
statement.
Please. Can I, for the love of God? Okay. So the problem, that not necessarily a problem, but there is a grain of truth to this. Okay. Iran Contra specifically, I'm sure Revolt is familiar with it. Basically, what was going on was we were supporting a group called the Sandinistas. They were an anti-leftist rebel guerrilla militia in southern South America. And what we did is we sold weapons to Iran for cash that we then transferred to the Sandinistas. Another revenue flow for the Sandinistas was cocaine trafficking into the United States. And there were CIA agents that basically did see planes going north with cocaine inside of it, and they didn't say shit about it to the fucking DEA. But I think that's a little bit different where you're trying to support by all accounts, a right-wing death squad. They killed teachers. They killed politicians. They killed leftist union leaders. They killed like all sorts of motherfuckers. I think that's different than say, I think the CIA seeing planes going north with cocaine on it is different than them saying, hey, FBI, DEA, fuck black people. We are going to pack the planes ourselves with cocaine. That's a different argument. And then on top of that, even if you were talking about, hold on, almost done. And then even if you were talking about this like one organization or whatever, again, it's like we have to talk about scale. Drug organizations can export drugs by themselves without government intervention. They have an interest in doing this, which is justified by profit, not just political motivation. I'll leave it there.
So hold on, like no one's saying that it was all these organizations working together. The DEA could have, been doing their job as they saw fit, right? Doing a bad job of it. But in any case, like to keep drugs out of America, to crack down on this, and then the CIA could have been operating by themselves, right? Like that's a thing, right?
Actually,
Yeah,
I don't. I'm sorry to interrupt. Sorry, Doobie, really quick. I actually don't. Prime, we might agree, but we probably don't agree on like intentionality, or we don't know whether or not intentionality is provable. So, for instance, if the CIA is working with a guerrilla organization that's partially funded through drug revenue, they're probably going to look the other way. At least that we can agree on, and then I'll shut the fuck up.
We can agree on that, but the specifics of this case are wildly different than that. Like we had literal C-130s piloted by people getting paid by the Air Force and the CIA that flew from fucking airfields in Colombia to like Arkansas, and like we know this, and like Barry Seal got killed over it, but like the big thing though is at the time we were working with like Noriega.
Barry Seal was a lying motherfucker. Like,
Yeah,
what
dude,
are you talking about?
He was a lying motherfucker. That's right. Like, that's how they painted him, because he narked on the cops. Like, of course they said that. But like, regardless,
No, he
of
was
that,
like a triple agent against
of course, he was
everybody.
crazy lunatic. That's fine. But he also existed. We know the story, and the story is like even on the most like fucking government law, like forward story is that like he was a drug dealer that worked with the government. Besides that, like Manuel Noriega was working with us for a long time. Like we know that too. Like I mean, like that all came out during his trial and afterwards. Like those are established facts.
It's not just them, but there's Freeway Ricky Ross, the original. He also worked as like a double agent that the government allowed to traffic millions of dollars of cocaine all over America for a long time.
Not the
Okay,
rapper who was a cop.
but
This
really,
is like
okay,
myth.
whether
Well, I
or
mean,
not whether or not
criminal,
it's,
not
okay,
the rapper. Yeah.
whether or not it's true, what does it even fucking matter, right?
It does matter.
You could dig into any government or institution and find awful shit they've done in the past, but going forward, hey, yeah, they shouldn't do those things. Great, now we're on the same page. They shouldn't do those things if they did them, and we need to move forward. And we can use these same organizations, or maybe make a new one and name it something else if you guys are afraid of that one, right? We can just call it something else, right? Start over, and
Well, the
and
people-
we can still work against the cartels. We can still do all the things that we were just talking about, right? I don't understand why you guys get hung up over this shit that these things did
Hugs
30 years ago,
People that
40
did
years
the
ago,
bad
even
things
10 years ago.
are
If they were
still
doing
in
bad
power.
shit and we know they're doing bad shit, hey, stop doing the bad shit, then we move forward.
Because it's indicative of what they're going to do in the future, Doobie, and it's the question of whether or not they can be trusted with power, or whether or not
Right.
they're going to manipulate it to
Whether,
their own
whether
end.
the U.S.
Why not-
government can be trusted with power?
No,
why
even
not?
if it was even if it was a syndicate within
But-
the CIA that was trusted with power and then abused that power, that would still be a fucking
So
problem.
how do you fix this problem, Connor?
Well,
I mean, power checks
do you-
power, but I'll shut up because Revolt
Do
wants
you
to talk.
dissolve the CIA?
I just
and
want to
then-
say,
and
I want
then
to say this.
build
though.
up another
Like,
organization that's probably going to end up staffed by the same people and call it something
Right.
else? Like, what the
we
fuck
have
do you
to get
do
these
about
people
this?
out of office.
Eventually, you need to get over the fact that this shit happened. Put in some checks, make sure it doesn't happen again, and move forward.
Bill Barr, like the guy who was our attorney general a year ago, right? Like was one of like the biggest actors in like the BCCI affair, right? Like if you're not familiar with it, they like the meme at the time was the Bank of Crooks and Criminals International, but that was the international bank where the money for the Iran-Contra deal and a bunch of other really shady things were going through, right? And Bill Barr was their head legal counsel. And like he was head legal counsel on Friday, and then on Monday, George Bush like hired him to be the attorney, like the assistant attorney general for the United States, and he shut down the investigation into BCCI that was being run at the time by Bob Mueller, like the same Bob Mueller and Bill Barr. Like they've been doing this bit for a while.
You want me to blow your whole fucking mind?
I mean-
So yeah. So fuck it, we're going down conspiracy
Yeah, they've
theories.
been doing the
I'm-
back
my
and
point-
forth
let me just
fixing
say-
for a long
Let me
time.
just finish this
hold
one
on, I
thing.
gotta
It's
blow
very
your
quick.
whole fucking mind. So Jeffrey Epstein's fiance, Ghislaine Maxwell, her father was like a triple operative for like Israel, the UK, and the United States, I want to say. So he was like, oh no, it was like Russia. He was like a triple agent for all three. And then on top of that, Jeffrey Epstein apparently didn't know fuck all about finance, despite being a billionaire. And I'm just putting out conspiracy theories because it's fun. I'm not saying this is true. But allegedly, Jeffrey Epstein didn't know fuck about finance, but was somehow a billionaire. And there's an allegation that part of the reason why the investigation into his sex crimes is so hush hush is because he was doing honeypots intentionally for intelligence agencies and then selling the information that he had.
Right. That's probably, I know that's
that he was actually an intelligence asset.
Sticking with facts, right? I put the link in the Discord and in chat, and I'll put it again. This is a copy of like a federal report called the BCCI affair, right? And it's written by John Kerry, who is like the investigating senator, and Bob Mueller was like one of the investigating FBI agent at the time, and like into the Bank of Crooks and Criminals International, which actually had a different meaning, but BCCI, and like all of these things, right, are all tied into it. Like, so the United States government, CIA, doing drug deals and doing guns deals and all these type of shady things were all run through this one single bank for years and years and years. So like Bill Barr was just the attorney general. Like, so how can we possibly like trust that the government that lets the guy that was doing these things like fix it?
Well, but again, so what's the solution?
Doobie has a good question.
We can't trust the government with anything because at every level they're corrupt, right? Our government, the Mexican government. Then what's the solution?
You're missing it. So this it's better and worse simultaneously. This basically what you're talking about is I'm familiar with Manuel Noriega as well. What you're talking about is the government doing all of its backdoor plays. People talk about shell corporations, they talk about shell banks, they talk about offshore banking, they talk about basically like black money and black ops and all that kind of stuff. All of what you're really talking about is because we live in the information age, information that was previously lost to the public because it was just so convoluted and complicated we wouldn't even know about it. You're talking about becoming aware of the financial organs that made black operations possible. So that's kind of the question. This actually gets back to Doobie, is if we had right-wing death squads, intelligence operations in general that were partially funded by arms sales, partially funded by gun sales, partially funded by networking and drugs and all that kind of shit, is this something that we care about if it's like some 5D chess national level interest shit? Or do we not care about it because it's acting in the 5D chess American interest? I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, the answer is that if these things were happening, typically, not always, generally, we were fighting right-wing death squads in some other country to help the United States, that's totally fine. If it was serving our interests, go for it. Right? If this was hurting our people in some way, if the drugs were getting back to our population and people were getting addicted on crack because of this, that's not a good thing. We shouldn't do that in the future. That doesn't mean that everything this organization does in the future is now tainted and not trusted. And if these things are happening, we should stop them from happening in the future and just like move forward. I really don't understand why we're getting hung up on this.
Yeah, I do. I can take it and we can run like the hypothetical, like assuming like like the perfect, like we do this with socialism and bullshit like that all the time. So why not? But like, I'm just saying that like intervention period has a long track record of having negative results. I don't think that even in a perfect situation with perfectly uncorrupt people doing perfect things, like I think that you're still going to have bad results because that's what happens.
Yeah, but Revolt, this is kind of poking at Doobie's point though. He's not saying that there isn't going to be bad shit that happens, but oftentimes like revolutions and political violence is viewed through the lens of its outcomes. So if you look at like the American Revolution, we all justify that. If we look at World War II, we all justify that. If we look at World War I, we justify it. So it's not that we didn't do horrendous shit during all of those conflicts. The question is, what was the outcome? And then what was the world order that was created out of that destruction? And then that begs some really interesting questions because it's like, can you have positive ends from nefarious means? And then if we extrapolate that question back through history, the answer is yes, question mark. And then the question is like, how do we, because we don't agree on means or ends, we're not going to agree here. But then what is the reality of like Doobie's realpolitik versus you saying like, just don't do evil, fucked up shit to human beings because they're human beings and you're supposed to have some level of morality. And the truth is, I don't fucking know. I don't know where America being on top as a global hegemon is morally better than China being a global hegemon. But is it a better hegemon if you're assassinating people in the middle of the fucking night and subsidizing drug dealers who torture people to death? I have no fucking idea. I like maybe Vosh can come in here and he can fucking give us like the consequentialist, like utilitarian fucking 10 head take. But I have no idea how to calculate this in my head.
Yeah, that's a utilitarian calculation problem. Like literally is what you just ran into. Like it's impossible to actually do that math.
Right.
Too many variables. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so at the end of the day, we just end up trusting that our side is the best side and hope it works out, I guess. But like, going back to, so this is actually terrifying in a few different ways. Not because there's like, super secret shit that happens, but the idea of super secret shit that happens coming to light and then like influencing the public's decision on like what to think about the government on some level. Like this is actually how countries get destabilized a lot of the time.
Trump was saying that he was going to declassify all the Kennedy files, and then at the last minute he held on to like 10 of them.
Yeah, specifically at the request of 3 members of the CIA. Like that's interesting.
Oh, and do you know who was the head of the CIA at the time of Kennedy's death?
Yeah.
Bush Senior.
It wasn't Bush Senior. It wasn't Bush Senior. It was way later.
Who was it?
It was Alan Dulles was like the head that got fired and it allegedly had the biggest role in plotting to kill him as a result.
Okay, and by the way, y'all, like I know we've been like swimming in like conspiratorial waters or whatever. I'm not fully on the like JFK assassination was done by the CIA thing, but even my eyebrow shoots up a little bit when Donald Trump is like, I'm gonna release it, and then he's like, psych.
No, I can't.
Right.
He did get those UFO docs out though. That was good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we already have aliens and nobody gave a fuck. Like literally like 2 years ago, they were like, hey guys, UFOs are probably real. We don't know what they are. It's probably aliens. And like the American public was like, I don't know. COVID's pretty intense. I don't think I can deal with that right now.
every single one of those is bullshit. As somebody who worked on fucking missile guidance systems, I can tell you exactly why. If you ever want to find out, I'll tell you.
The Tic Tac stuff? The Tic Tac UFO?
It's completely nonsense, yeah.
Oh man, I'd love to talk to you about that shit some other time. All right,
Anytime.
sorry for tangenting.
Yeah, there's some good videos on it, but yeah, I think Revolt is completely right on this. Sadly.
Sad but true. Like I want aliens as much as the next guy. I'd like to kiss one, but like see what happens.
Okay.
Are we gonna transfer into kinks now?
What makes you think your life would be any better with them?
Let's talk about kinks again.
Yeah, Prime, you're not jumping in, so I'm just gonna say the meme. NASA says aliens may not be fuckable, and then the bottom part of the meme is not with that attitude.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta believe in yourself. You gotta try hard.
Okay. So about guns and sending them to Mexico.
Back to the aliens that matter.
We weren't on guns in Mexico. We were on fucking UFOs.
Yeah.
No.
JFK.
No. Like, if I may, for 1 second, like the reason why I was anywhere near this at all is because, like, if we think that we can go and do better, like, we are dumb and we are refusing to learn, and like we are refusing to look at history and we're refusing to look at empirical evidence on the issue. Like every time we get involved, it fucks up worse. Like we should stop getting involved.
I mean,
but I'm
pretty much in agreement there.
But if what we're dealing with is a very unstable government right south of our border that's being like run in a lot of places by violent cartels that aren't friendly to the United States and have already killed American citizens, we just ignore that? Like, what do you suggest?
No, we're not ignoring it. We're threading a needle. We're literally saying, here's enough aid so that your government doesn't collapse. This will like let you own the majority of your country.
That aid is going to be misappropriated by the wrong entities, and that's why
you guys just finished telling us how corrupt this government is, and you want to give them money now?
I literally think what's going to happen here is that the United States is just trying to play both sides on some level, right? And just try to keep the status quo going because they don't have a solution. Like, what do we do when we don't have a solution for a problem? We kick the can down the road, and that's what we're doing right now, like very clearly.
Well, and on top of that, like, who's to say that like the end all be all of the federal government was to actually end drugs as a blight on American society? Americans love drugs; it's a massive part of our culture. So on one hand, they can pretend that they fucking hate it while simultaneously celebrating it and doing drugs privately themselves. They can say that they're fighting it to the moms of America while also doing cocaine with their mistress when they, go to Boca or some shit. So like, so I do one of the sadder things about growing up, unfortunately, is the fact that it seems like you're raised to think about all these problems where you're like, okay, there's problems, let's solve them. And then you grow up and you realize that a bunch of adults, they're not interested in solving the problems, they're interested in profiting from the problems. And then that sucks because you're like, oh shit, like, are they interested in solving problems or do they just want to profit from them? And that's a tough question to answer.
But you guys currently, have taken on that I don't want to call it a poison. It's like a virus that you've taken on.
Mind virus.
Because now you're being a nihilist and you're saying, hey, we just can't do anything about this. We just got to let it happen. Hey, we're threading the needle. We're working both sides. We don't really have a solution. Hey, maybe we should legalize all the drugs. Maybe we should legalize prostitution. Maybe that'll make it better. But hey, maybe it won't.
No, we didn't say maybe it won't. Like, it'll make things
bending over and spreading open your ass.
No, it'll literally make things better.
I'll meet Doobie in the middle, though. Like, Doobie, I'll meet you in the middle. Like, what we should do is, like, as far as our border is, you know what I mean? Like, we should enforce our laws, like, and we should do so with like as much fucking funding and fucking reckless abandon as we can possibly imagine. Like, but like where the border is where our bullshit needs to stop. Like, and like if we do that, I think that we will find that the things are resolved in the other countries in a much faster pace than it would be if we get involved.
When those caravans of unaccompanied children show up at the border, do we just turn them away? You're okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, but why would we turn them away when we could just drone bomb them before they get even close? Like, we don't know if there's
nobody's suggesting that, right? No, I'm asking you seriously. When these people show up at the border begging for help because their countries are being destroyed by cartels and they're afraid of the violence and they want better lives, are you okay with just turning them away?
Revolt, this is a pressing question. Okay, but no, we don't. And on top of that, this is actually this is an interesting question because to me, what it kind of sounds like is you're saying that we're giving up our moral obligation in these countries. They'll resolve their own problems and we only make things worse. But to Doobie's point, if that absolves us of moral obligation to people from other countries because we're not involved in their shit, then do we still have a moral responsibility when they show up to our border, not through a fuck up of our making?
We've never ever had moral obligation has been my only point. Like what we've been sold to us as a moral obligation has been bullshit. We've been literally helping these people do terrorist things like in these countries for decades. Like
this is a question of scale. Okay, but Revolt, this is a question of scale.
A question of scale. But when you hear that when the cartels cut somebody's head off, is it 100 heads or 1,000 heads? Is it 60,000 heads or is it 200,000 heads? Because the United States government has killed 60,000, 80,000, 200,000. Like, pick a country and we can assign these numbers. But like if we're kicking in doors and killing socialists, right? Like, how is that not worse than what is going on here? Like, and so
if you want to stack up like, the corpse table, we can do that. But
Central and South America, but yes,
you're saying what?
In Central and South America, like the comparison, like from like what the government we know for a fact, admitted that we've helped facilitate, right? And what's going on with cartels? How is it different to allow cartels that are doing beheadings? Like, I mean, like, it's gross. I understand.
Who cares? When these, if we're gonna go with your solution, we stay in our borders, we care about our own shit, we enforce our laws here. Okay,
we can offer intelligence.
When these cartels that already exist, they already have control, they already have the money and the weapons and all this shit. When they're fucking up these countries, these people come to our border begging for help, trying to get in because they're trying to escape the violence. Are you okay with turning them away?
I mean, I'm not okay with turning them away now or then or anytime. I think that anybody should be able to do that here. That's my position.
I mean,
but I understand why you would want not to.
Yeah, Doobie is saying own it or don't. That's kind of what he's saying. Like we either have a moral obligation or we don't.
I'm saying
I think we can.
Now we're not letting them in the country already.
Like, it's not either or at all. No, like, literally, we have a choice in terms of like what needle we thread, right? Like, we can literally say, okay, we will bring in folks who are refugees. We will fund governments, the military of some governments to help fight cartels. We can also, at the same time, decriminalize and maybe even legalize some drugs so that cartels can't profit from those drugs. We can do a bunch of very small changes and see how the small changes impact the situation. Some sort of massive, crazy, like, let's just shove the chessboard aside and just try something nuts and see what happens solution is just as likely to make things 1,000 times worse than better. Like, how are we going to use our military to make it better?
Is not only not helping those countries, right? Because these cartels will just get into legal production of these drugs. They'll get into legal production of these drugs, and then they'll still do all the other crazy shit on the side.
Well,
Right,
I
so-
mean, at
Right,
first,
so
yeah,
that,
but
that
like,
won't
at
that
first
won't
things are
really
gonna be
solve
bad with
that
your
won't really solve the
solution of, hey,
problem
let's send the military
of
to shoot
fucking
things up,
cartels
right?
controlling massive parts of Mexico. That won't solve that issue.
No, I mean,
they'll just have
like,
the
this
money
is
illegal,
a
some of
issue
the money
that took.
legally now.
This is an issue that took
And
100
so
years
not only
to
are you not
create.
helping them,
We're not going to be able to do it overnight.
You're,
Like,
in my opinion, damaging the culture of the United States by not really legalizing the drugs. I don't think that'll damage the culture, but the prostitution and all this other shit that they're into that we need to legalize to take away their sources
I
of
mean,
funding.
we can
Wait, why should
we can break this
legalize
apart
prostitution?
piecemeal, like one at a time, like what brings about the most harm, et cetera, et cetera. But
Yeah.
like the fact of the matter is, this is a problem that has been in existence for decades, and there's no like 1 year solution for it. Like whatever solution we are implementing, we have to be thinking about solving the issue decades from now.
Oh, okay.
Like, that's
Well,
it.
I
Like, I don't
agree.
know
I agree.
how
This is
we
why I'm
can-
saying.
okay.
Well, hold on. I agree with you. This is why I'm saying that. Yeah, we put up with some death in the short term, some death and destruction. Very sad people. Oh God, we're droning cartels in
Okay.
Mexico. Some innocent civilians died. Oh God, this
So
is
I'm going to
terrible.
take
But in
everything
the
you
long,
said,
but in the
oh,
long
God, death and
term,
destruction, et cetera,
but
et
in
cetera,
the
and
long
apply it
term-
directly to
but in the
your
long
argument.
term, but in the long term, hey, there's no cartels running Mexico. The government isn't corrupt and full of people that are afraid of the cartels.
Presuming that you're
There's no
correct. that
guarantee
We don't have
about long
people-
term.
Okay, sorry.
We don't have
Now,
people that have been gunned
Sorry.
down by.
Go ahead.
I think-
Sorry, we gotta move on.